A dream left me with profound apprehension all night long. The Pope was surrounded by cardinals and bishops who were shouting at him with rebellious words. We do not want to live a life that is imposed on us. We want to be free to practice a religion that is to our liking. The Pope was weeping and crying out, no, it is impossible to replace the cult of Christ with pagan cults. The church has always fought strongly against atheism and idolatry, but the Pope was grabbed and thrown down a well.
I Miss Christendom. I don't know if you've ever seen that YouTube channel. We're going to link to it in the show notes today, but I've watched a ton of his videos. In fact, I was watching some of his videos when I was on a plane ride to go to Rome last October, because I was going to be there to go to the LifeSite Forum event, and I was going to be interviewing Saverio Gaeta about Tre Fontane, The Three Fountains, a book that he wrote, the apocalyptic prophecies of the Virgin of Revelation. She appeared there in 1947 to a man by the name of Bruno Cornacchiola. I filmed an interview with him at the grotto. We talked about the life of Bruno. We talked about the message that she gave to him and about the third secret of Fatima. All of that is in the documentary film. Steve Brous from I Miss Christendom has been given a copy of a book that Saverio Gaeta wrote that is much fuller, has a tremendous amount more detail in it, and I find the differences incredibly fascinating. By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below. Last year, I was in Rome. I shared this story many times, but I produced this documentary film where I sat down with Saverio Gaeta to have an interview about Bruno Cornacchiola and the prophecies and the message of Our Lady at Tre Fontane, Our Lady of Revelation.
And he wanted to kill the Pope. The second part is connected with the Fatima secret.
April 12th, 1947. Destiny has brought a 33-year-old street-hardened communist spy in the Spanish Civil War, now turned fallen-away Catholic, driving trams on the streets of Rome here to the eucalyptus trees and thorn bushes of the hill across from Tre Fontane.
I got to tell you, you can watch the whole film yourself. It's going to be linked in the show notes today. It's also available in our iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can check out the ICR Premium tab at the bottom right there. But when I was there and I talked to Saverio Gaeta, he was telling me about the split within the community that Bruno founded after his April 12th, 1947 encounter with the Virgin of Heaven. And he also shared with me how the messages were trying to be downplayed and sanitized for modern ears, and to the point where there's a marble plaque that they actually edited after he died. They chiseled out the words and filled it in, and he showed it to me. It's hilarious. But recently, Steve Brous on the channel I Miss Christendom has posted a video that really caught my attention. Now, I've watched I Miss Christendom for a while now. In fact, I was watching some of his videos on my plane ride to Rome back in October, and he has come across an Italian work by Saverio Gaeta that is far more detailed, has a lot more information, and I've invited him on to have a conversation about that. Your video I thought was great. I enjoy your channel. Thank you for producing the content that you do. We're going to link to it in the show notes today. But this especially caught my attention. I've been a huge fan of Our Lady of Revelation now for a long time, especially since Father Wolf's whole series of lectures on the subject that he gave several years ago. So I was excited to go to Rome. I was excited to visit the grotto. I was especially excited to talk to Mr. Gaeta about all of this, and we had a fascinating conversation. But it seems like this Italian version that you have been talking about is got a tremendous amount more meat on the bone. Tell me about how you came across this. What is this bigger, larger version? What do we know about it?
Well, originally I was contacted by a lady, and she had a English translation, the bootleg English translation of what she thought and I thought was Three Fountains, which is the book that you had. And so when I made the video, what I was doing was comparing what I thought was the Italian version versus the English version of the same book. But as it turns out, the first book that the author did was called Il Vente, and it came out in 2016. Mm-hmm. And it is a much larger work. It even claims to have the entire diary of Bruno in it. If you don't know, Bruno did receive the message from Our Lady, but he also kept a diary where he received more messages and had a lot of prophetic dreams. And there's considerable amount that's in Il Vente, which is in Italian and Polish. I don't think you can find it in English. I looked on Kindle and I looked on Amazon. I looked all through the internet, and the only thing I could find in English was Three Fountains, which is a much smaller, condensed version.
Who made that English version? Is it just AI translation, like Google Translate or something?
I have no idea, but since I've made the video, I did go ahead and download the Italian version of Il Vagente in my Kindle, which does have a translator. You can highlight and press translate. You can't just translate the whole thing. But I went through and checked several of the quotes that I have in my video and that I have now to make sure that they were authentic. And I kind of randomly checked different things to make sure that it was an authentic translation. But as far as where it comes from, I have no idea. I did find it online. You can actually find that copy online if you type in the search bar English version of Il Vagente or whatever, and I think it's on Divine Will or something like that. But I don't know who produced that particular translation.
So in your video, you go through like sort of the big broad strokes of the differences between what you found in Il Vagente and what we're finding in Tre Fontane. It's a short work, right? It's super. The Three Fountains is easy to read. You can read this in a day practically. But there's still some really good and juicy things in this book. I've highlighted a bunch of them. I shared them a lot on my program. But then there's still some things that are very watered down. And this is something that Saverio Gaeta shared with me, was there was a real split in the community, in the Sacri, and half of them wanted a better relationship with the see in Rome, right? So the local diocese. Bruno was a hard man. And this is what Saverio told me. He was a hard man. He was a rough, street thug kind of a guy. And even after his conversion, his personality didn't get warm and fuzzy. He was converted, he was zealous, and he still was hard around the edges. So a lot of people had a hard time getting along with him, so to speak. As a result, the local clergy didn't want to hear what he had to say. The local clergy certainly didn't want to hear negative messages. There was no toleration for Debbie Downers. So he was telling me about all of this, and you seem to be confirming that in your video. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. Because if you read Three Fountains, you're going to get the basic idea. You're going to get the message. You're going to get, the gist of it, so to speak. But with Il Vagente, like we've said, it is much more, has much more of an impact, has much more of an urgency, and it seems to be a lot more critical of bishops and priests than you would find. Not that you're not going to find criticism of bishops and priests in Three Fountains, but with Il Vagente, it's a lot more hard hitting.
This is something Mr. Gaeta told me a lot about as well, was he was so angry after Vatican II because there was an ecumenical movement to act like, nope, you don't have to come into the church. It's fine. Stay where you're at. We can all just get along. He was angry about that, he said, because it was clear that the Virgin said there is no salvation outside the church, that you must become a member of this flock again. And she was very adamant about that and strong in her tone and her approach. This is what I was told. And so he was pretty bitter at the local clergy for embracing this ecumenical movement, which, didn't help him any to win favors at the Vatican. So, but with that, there's one thing that really stood out to me in your video, and that was about the Pope. And this is something in the book that I always found slightly troubling. Given the nature of the third secret of Fatima essentially being revealed to Bruno in 1947 and then shared with Pope Pius XII, which the Il Vagente also talks about, this Three Fountains really starts to make it seem like the Pope, you can never disagree with the Pope, like the Pope can do no wrong, always just to go along with it. The Three Fountains really seems to have a flavor of that, and yet you seem to suggest in the Italian version there's a nuance to that was missed in the Three Fountains. Can you explain that?
Yeah, let me get to it real quick. One thing that is not in Three Fountains, that's in Il Vagente, is a quote. This is, do you see, my son, you are bound to... Well, first of all, she's going through about people obeying the Pope and people who don't obey the Pope, which you're going to see, happy the people who obey the Pope, not happy the ones that don't. But in Il Vagente, we have a quote where she says, do you see, my son, you are bound to obey the person who gives you an order even though you think he is wrong. you're bound to obey unless that order touches faith, morality, and charity. Then no.
Wow.
And that's not in Tre Fontane.
That could be missed. Like, you could skip over that so quick and not get the gravity of it. But that's a huge thing, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in these days, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
In your video, I think you even said that sort of confirms recognize and resist.
That's what I think. Yeah, absolutely. You're also going to find a lot more references to keeping tradition in Il Vagente than you are in Tre Fountains. In fact, there's one quote, and I'll have to find it, but it basically says, God has in fact allowed him, Satan, to have a certain freedom of his own actions. However, this freedom is limited and cannot go beyond the boundaries set by your own forces or beyond limitations of the will of God. Therefore, do not reject the holy things of the past and do not give rise to any schism. Apply yourselves to work instead of pray for unity, faith, and not just for togetherness.
Oof. Let me just read this one little quick paragraph from chapter 3, the message. The notebook with the words of the Virgin that Cornacchiola handed to Pius XII is currently in one of those archives, which are like a deep, dark well in which the papers fall into the bottom and no one sees them. Cardinal Alfredo Ottavani used this description when in charge of the Holy Office and referring to the third secret of Fatima. I find it fascinating because, it was a crazy, great story with Bruno after he wanted to kill Pius XII, having to meet Pius XII and, basically confess to Pius XII and give him the knife and everything that, hey, I wanted to kill you. And he gives out of obedience to Our Lady this message, but this message finds its way into a Vatican archive that never sees the light of day. Let's talk about Fatima and Lucy. All right, so he met or he talked to Sister Lucy? Well,
he would have mystical encounters with Sister Lucy. And then they would talk, and there's one that there was actually several that are in the book, but there's one that I pulled out. It says, the Pope says, it is Sister Lucia Fatima. She stood, we bowed. We spoke about the message and what the church will have to go through because of the priests who deviate from the right path. Do you see how much emotional confusion Satan succeeds in bringing to all souls, and by now almost reigns in all high commanding posts, and he works undisturbed, employing his helpers to do his will. He brings all things to an end, especially, and this they do not believe, Satan will enter into all commanding places of the church and seduce all with vainglorious ambitions, especially in removing the devotion to the beautiful mother and creating in all a coldness towards the faith. This power will be extended over those responsible for the good of the people in a frightening way. With powerful weapons, they will destroy each other. What is needed is an individual apostolate, not a monopolized apostolate, i.e. not an exclusive monopoly, but work for the conversion of many souls. In the apostolate, we must work among individual souls without any prior authorization. Those who know must work, otherwise they sin.
You also talk about how Sister Lucia wanted to do a radio message to the world. What was that?
Well, that's just a mention in the book, and you actually covered it, but it says, at the beginning of the same year, the Pope, in accordance with the Cardinal Tardini and Ottaviani, had denied Sister Lucy permission to launch a radio message to the world. Now, I don't know what she would have said, but it must have been pretty important if she wanted to talk to the entire world. When you read the messages of Our Lady of Revelation, it confirms a lot of things, like with Akita and Our Lady of Good Success. It's the same thing. What's going to happen to the church, what's going to happen to the world. It does say that there will be a frightful war that's coming that will be worse than the last two put together. It says that there's going to be weapons of mass destruction and we will basically destroy each other. That talks about the condition of the church. One thing that I thought was interesting that's in Il Vagente that's not in Tre Fountains, when it talks about the third secret of Fatima, it talks about John the 23rd reading the secret. It even mentions that Malachi Martin was there at one of the readings. But then it talks about why they didn't give us the secret in 1960. And it says that Monsignor Louis Capavella said, quote, even though they knew that Fatima was true, that they could not confirm what Sister Lucy had given them was true. And it says, not all of it contained a supernatural tone. One has to be certain of supernatural things, and we do not dare risk an immediate interpretation. Well, that doesn't go along with what we were given. Everything that was given to us in 2000 has a supernatural tone. So here again, we have another comment by somebody who read The Secret, and they made a comment before The Secret was revealed, and it doesn't coincide with what we were given.
In Three Fountains, there is some pretty edgy points about the corruption within the church at the highest levels and how they would fail to teach, and they would mislead, even teach false teachings to the lay faithful, and how they would, the image of the cassock and the broken cross at her feet in the cave there in the grotto. I mean, that was all in there. But when I watched your video, it seems like it's really in the Il Vegente version. Like, it's even more explicitly clear that she is warning Bruno about the infiltration, demonic, satanic infiltration at the highest levels of authority and power in the church. That seems pretty frightening.
Yes, it does. And I agree with you. There's a lot, like I said, if you read Three Fountains, you're going to get the gist of it. And it does chastise the clergy and talk about the infiltration. But then I want to give you a quote that's in Il Vegente that's not in Three Fountains. There's actually several of them, but there's one that I really want. It says, and it seems to me that what they really did is take out the prophetic dreams. That he had a lot of prophetic dreams, and there's only a little section in Three Fountains. But here's one. It says, 11 March 1970, what a terrible night I had. A dream left me with profound apprehension all night long. The Pope was surrounded by cardinals and bishops who were shouting at him with rebellious words. We do not want to live a life that is imposed on us. We want to be free to practice a religion that is to our liking, our own local system. The Pope was weeping and crying out, no, it is impossible to replace the cult of Christ with pagan cults. The church has always fought strongly against atheism and idolatry, but the Pope was grabbed and thrown down a well.
Whew. Ahmad asked the question, is this apparition Vatican approved? That's a question I've been asked on a few occasions. Steve, I can share with what I know about it, but Steve, what do you know about the approval of Tre Fontane?
So my understanding is it's not officially approved, and of course now it won't be because they got rid of that. But it did have, if you go on Miracle Hunter, it says that it has approval from the, I think it was the Roman Pontificate or something like that. I can't remember. But in the diary, it says that Pius XII did not give an official approval for it, but it is one where the devotions are encouraged. It's almost like it's generally seen as true, but it just hasn't gotten that yet. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. What I find fascinating is something I always mention when I talk about Tre Fontane is, so April 12th, 1947, Bruno has his first interaction with Our Lady, Queen of Heaven. By the summer, he is giving the message to Pius XII. He is meeting Pius XII for the first time and sharing his message of April or summer of, I think it was July of 1947. By October of 1947, 70,000 pilgrims start in St. Peter's Square, get blessed by Pius XII with the new statue, and process all the way out to Tre Fontane, where they set it up in the grotto. An altar is placed there. Masses are approved there. So there's no official, we endorse everything that's said here. That's true. However, there's an awful strong endorsement there just on from Pius XII's blessing and okay with the apparition site, right? So I think that's telling. Right. Also, in 1950, something we've talked to Father Charles Murr about, about this in the past, is in 1950, Pius XII received the miracle of the dancing of the sun in the Vatican gardens. Mother Pasqualina was sort of the witness to that day and that event. She didn't see it herself, but when he comes in, the look on his face was like, he was pale and looked, like he had seen something. And so she asked him, and he says, well, I saw the blessed, I saw the sun spinning or whatever. And I think Father Murr said, well, to Mother Pasqualina shared, well, did you hear any voice? Did anybody say anything? And Pius XII reportedly said, I heard one word, repent, or something along those lines. It's been a while since Father Murr told me that story, but I thought that was pretty telling. So is it officially approved? No, but it's also got enough endorsement, in my opinion, so that we shouldn't be ignoring it. We should be looking into it. Something else, Steve, that Dr. Gaeta kind of, because I kept asking him follow-up questions towards the end. Why doesn't the church pay attention? Why doesn't the Vatican like take this seriously? I've been to all the other sites. This one is not, it's empty. There's hardly anybody here. You go to the other ones and they're packed to the gills. Like, what's up with that? And he said to me in his broken English, he said, he goes, it's like if I come home from a long day of work and my wife's trying to cook dinner and I walk in and the first thing I do is try to tell her how to make my dinner. You know, she gets a little offended by that. He goes, the Vatican gets a little offended every time a mother of Jesus shows up to tell them something. Yeah, he said they kind of just like say, yes, mother, we know, we have our job. Leave us to it. Like he says, that's their attitude, and so they basically dismiss and downplay almost all of these prophetic messages, but they especially downplayed Bruno's because of his personality and his gruffness and his not wanting to tolerate the post-Vatican II shenanigans.
One thing that's always stuck in my mind when it talks about the reading of the third secret and John the 23rd deciding not to go forward with it, in Il Vente, it says, and I'm going to paraphrase it says, it wasn't until 2000 that John Paul II decided to release the third secret with considerable cloudiness to basically leaving doubt whether or not the full thing was revealed, right?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say that in Three Fountains. It just says in 2000, it was not until, and it actually gives it word for word. It wasn't until 2000 that John Paul II decided to release the third secret, and it just stops. It left that part out. So that's obviously done on purpose.
Yeah.
This is obviously why she chose him, or one of the reasons, because he was such an ardent enemy of the church. He even wanted to kill the Pope, and he even wanted to use scripture. It even says that he was using scripture to try to bring down the church. It talks about him going to a debate or something like that, and he would constantly shout down the priests as they were quoting scripture, saying, "You just quote them this way you want. You can't fool us and no scripture," and all that stuff. So yeah, for him to, not, I don't want to say it's St. Paul, obviously, but it's in the same lines as St. Paul, who was trying to destroy the church, and now he becomes the most ardent defender of the faith. Chris
Schoonmaker says, Joe, do you think that in this spiritual battle that Our Lady knew that Fatima, the third secret, would not be read, exposing the infiltration, exposing Vatican II? She is exposing the enemy, warning us. Steve, what would you say to that? Do you think Our Lady knew at Fatima that this message would somehow get delayed, get stonewalled, and she was looking for other alternatives?
Well, I'm sure she did know that, obviously, unless God withheld it from her for some reason. But yeah, I definitely do believe that because of that, that's why we have Akita. That's why we have Our Lady of Revelation. I think Pope Benedict XVI even said that Akita was just the message of Fatima. And then, of course, we have the connection with Fatima and Our Lady of Revelation.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.